Johnson had never held anything so delicate in his entire life, yet his hands trembled as if the weight of the world rested in them. His newborn daughter, warm, tiny, and barely minutes old, rested against his chest while his heart pounded hard enough to shake him. Her soft cries filled the hospital room, but his mind was stuck on Jan's voice, still echoing in his ears. "Johnson, the fire wasn't an accident. Someone caused it. Someone from your world." He felt the floor of his life tilt beneath him. He thought the worst thing he would face today was becoming a father unexpectedly. But he was wrong, because the fire, the months of silence, the pregnancy, none of that compared to the final truth Jan had whispered moments earlier. "He's back!" That single sentence chilled him more than the hospital air ever could. It wasn't just a threat. It wasn't just a warning. It meant the man responsible for tearing their marriage apart had returned. And this time, Johnson wasn't alone. He had a daughter to protect. Before his life took this sharp turn, Johnson believed heartbreak was the worst pain a person could feel. But holding his child while learning the truth made him question everything he once knew. Let me ask you something. Have you ever loved someone deeply, only to lose them because life became too heavy to carry together? Have you ever thought you understood your past, only for one shocking moment to flip everything upside down? Have you ever wondered if the wrong timing can break something that was meant to last? If so, this story will speak to a place inside you that doesn't get touched often. Johnson believed the divorce closed the book on their life together. He accepted the silence, the distance, the pain. He told himself it was over, but all of that shattered at 6:43 a.m. when his phone rang, and Jan's shaky voice pushed him into a storm he never expected. "Johnson, I need you. Please." He didn't know he would become a father that morning. He didn't know she had gone through chaos alone. He didn't know danger had been following her. He didn't know someone connected to him had caused it. He didn't know the truth was about to shake him to his core. So stay with me until the end, because once you hear what really happened during those 7 months, you'll understand why Johnson froze inside that hospital room, physically, emotionally, and spiritually, when Jan finally revealed the full truth. Before we dive deeper into this unforgettable journey, please like this video and comment below. It truly helps YouTube recommend our stories to more wonderful viewers like you. Before we return to the beginning, let me show you the moment that changed everything. Johnson stood outside Jan's hospital room hours later, staring down the man responsible for their suffering. The walls felt tight. His pulse hammered. Security guards hovered nearby, unsure whether to intervene. The man smirked. Johnson's jaw clenched. At that moment, he realized the battle was no longer about the past. It was about the family he never expected to have, and the danger he never saw coming. Welcome to Mr. Michael's Stories Hub, where America's greatest stories and life lessons meet creativity and heart. If you're new to the family, "We're grateful to have you here. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It helps us bring more unforgettable stories your way." Johnson's penthouse had never been this quiet. The glass walls that once showed the beauty of Washington's skyline now only reminded him of how empty his life felt. The city below carried on, horns, footsteps, conversations drifting through the morning air. But inside his home, everything felt muted. He sat at the edge of his bed, staring at the floor. The sheets beside him were untouched, perfectly smooth, undisturbed for months. This was the part of life nobody warned him about, the silence after losing someone who once filled every corner of his world. Most mornings, he moved through the penthouse like a man on autopilot. Coffee he barely finished. Meetings he rushed through. Nights spent staring at the television without really watching anything. His wealth, once a source of pride, felt dull now. A penthouse meant nothing when the person who once laughed in it was gone. He walked into the living room, and without meaning to, his eyes fell on the photo he still hadn't been able to put away. Yan's smile lit up the frame. Her natural curls, her confident posture, her warm presence. She was the kind of woman whose voice filled a room with life. Someone who had grown up surrounded by family, community, porch gatherings, and a sense of belonging that Johnson never fully understood, but always admired. He remembered visiting her neighborhood during their marriage. There were always cousins stopping by, neighbors chatting, music playing from someone's porch. It was loud in a comforting way, a kind of togetherness he had never experienced growing up. His world had been quiet dinners, private clubs, and conversations about business. She teased him once, saying he lived in a museum. Everything neat, everything quiet, everything still. He laughed at the time, but now, walking through his silent penthouse, he realized she had been right. He stopped in the kitchen, letting the stillness press against him. It was the kind of stillness that felt heavy on the chest. He wished things had been different. He wished he had known how to bridge the gap between their worlds. He wished he hadn't allowed misunderstandings to pull them apart. But regret didn't change the present. He ran a hand through his messy hair and opened the fridge, staring at food he wouldn't eat. He shut it again, feeling that familiar numbness spread through him. For 7 months, he had told himself he was fine. He wasn't. As he moved toward the living room, he glanced at the clock. 6:43 a.m. A second later, his phone vibrated on the counter. He didn't rush to it. He didn't think anything unusual was happening. But then he saw the name glowing on the screen. Januar? His chest tightened so sharply he had to steady himself. The silence of the penthouse suddenly felt louder, heavier, almost suffocating. The phone kept ringing, and in that moment, something inside him broke through the numbness. This was not a call he could ignore. Something was wrong. Something serious. The tension in the air grew thick as the phone continued to ring, and Johnson realized his life was about to change again. The phone continued buzzing on the counter, vibrating against the surface like it was impatient with him. Johnson stared at the screen, unable to look away from the name he never expected to see again. Januar. For a moment, he wondered if his eyes were playing tricks on him. 7 months without a single word, and now, at a time when the sun hadn't fully risen, her name glowed on his phone like a message from a life he had buried. His breath quickened. He didn't move. All he could hear was the faint hum of the refrigerator and the soft ringing echoing through the penthouse. Why now? Why today? Why after everything? He reached for the phone, but his hand hesitated inches above it. His mind stormed with questions he wasn't ready to face. Should I answer? She okay? This a mistake? Is someone using her phone? His thumb hovered over the screen as his heart pounded hard enough to make his fingers shake. He finally answered. January? His voice came out lower than he expected. There was breathing on the other end. Unsteady, strained, sharp. Not the breathing of someone relaxed. Not the breathing of someone calling for casual conversation. Johnson! Her voice cracked, and that alone made his chest tighten. I don't have time to explain, but I need you right now. He stood upright, adrenaline spiking. What's wrong? Where are you? A painful groan escaped her before she could respond. I'm at the hospital. Another strained breath. I'm in labor. Everything inside him stopped. His brain went blank. His body froze. The words didn't compute. Labor, as in right now? Yes, she snapped, her voice trembling and frustrated. I'm having a baby, Johnson. He pressed a hand to his forehead, pacing back and forth, as if movement would help his brain catch up. But how? I mean, who? Jan cut him off with a sound built from exhaustion and disbelief. It's your baby. He stopped pacing, stopped blinking, stopped breathing. My what? Your baby, she repeated, her voice calmer but loaded with urgency. I found out late. A lot happened. I couldn't call sooner. Please, just come. He didn't know what to feel. Shock? Fear? Joy? Confusion? Everything hit him at once, and none of it made sense. He pressed a hand to his chest, trying to steady himself. The room felt smaller. The air felt tighter. Jan groaned again, and this time it snapped him out of his trance. I don't want to do this alone, she whispered. Those words did something to him. Cut through every barrier he had built, every excuse he had rehearsed during the divorce. He grabbed his jacket, nearly tripping over his shoes as he headed for the door. But before he stepped out, he forced himself to breathe and speak into the phone. I'm coming. Don't worry, I'm on my way. He hung up, gripping the phone so tightly his knuckles turned pale. If you're hooked already, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories. Your support helps us share more emotional, powerful narratives like this one. With that, Johnson rushed out of the penthouse, locking the door behind him, but leaving behind the version of himself who thought life couldn't change in a single moment. Today proved it could. He didn't even realize he forgot his other shoe until he reached the elevator. But then he didn't care. His entire world had just shifted, and he had no choice but to run with it. Johnson barely remembered locking the penthouse door as he stormed down the hallway. His heartbeat echoed louder than his footsteps, loud enough to make the world around him blur. He reached the parking garage with the same energy as someone sprinting toward a finish line. They didn't know they were running. His car beeped as he unlocked it, but even that sound felt distant. His hands were shaking so badly that he nearly dropped the keys twice before finally getting the engine started. He pulled out of the garage faster than he should have, tires squealing just slightly across the concrete as he sped into the early Washington morning. The city was waking up, traffic lights blinking, commuters heading to work, buses starting their routes, but he wasn't paying attention to any of it. All he could think about was January. Her voice, her pain, her fear, her saying the baby was his. His mind spun with too many questions, none of which he had time to answer. He gripped the steering wheel tighter, breathing unevenly as he drove through familiar streets that suddenly felt unfamiliar under the weight of the moment. He didn't even realize he was speeding until he passed a cyclist who shouted after him, "Hey, some of us are trying to live, man." Johnson flinched so hard he nearly swerved. "Sorry," he yelled out the window, though the cyclist was already pedaling away, shaking his head. That brief moment of humor didn't calm him, but it snapped him back into awareness. He forced himself to breathe slowly as he turned onto the road leading to the hospital. Every traffic light felt like a personal attack. Every slow driver felt like an enemy. Every second wasted felt unforgivable. "Hold on, Jan. Just hold on," he muttered. He pulled into the hospital parking lot with the urgency of someone who didn't care about lines, rules, or proper alignment. He slid the car into a space crooked enough to make any parking attendant weep, then jumped out and slammed the door behind him. The sliding doors opened, and he rushed into the lobby, scanning the room like someone searching for a missing treasure. A receptionist sat behind the counter, tapping calmly on her keyboard. Johnson leaned forward, breathless. I'm looking for Jan." The woman blinked in confusion. "Last name?" Johnson froze. "Last name?" She stared at him, as if waiting for him to deliver the obvious answer. But he didn't have one. He rubbed the back of his neck, embarrassment creeping into his voice. "Look, I only ever called her Jan. Just Jan." The receptionist raised an eyebrow. "Sir, we have quite a few people here today. I need more than that." "Okay, she's in labor, and she called me, and she's very loud," as if summoned by fate. A nurse walking by overheard and leaned closer. "Oh, you must be looking for her. She's the one yelling at the doctor about the thermostat. Johnson's eyes widened. That certainly sounded like January. Yes, that's her. Follow me, the nurse said, with a small smile. Johnson trailed behind her, heart pounding faster with each step. The hallway lights reflected against the polished floor as they moved past rooms filled with nurses adjusting equipment, families whispering anxiously, and doctors checking charts. His nervousness grew with every passing doorway. As they turned the corner, the nurse pointed ahead. She's right in there. Johnson stared at the door for a moment, his breath catching in his chest. Everything he had been feeling, shock, fear, confusion, uncertainty, gathered at once inside him. He hesitated with his hand hovering over the door handle. Everything was about to change, and once he stepped inside, there would be no going back. With one deep breath, he pushed the door open. The door clicked behind Johnson as he stepped into Jan's hospital room, and for a moment the rest of the world faded to nothing. The steady rhythm of medical monitors, the muffled voices in the hallway, even the sound of his own breath, all of it dimmed as his eyes settled on her. Jan lay propped up against a stack of pillows, beads of sweat along her forehead, her jaw clenched as she pushed through another contraction. The strength she always carried showed in the way she gripped the bed rails, in the way she fought through the pain without complaint. Even exhausted, she still had a presence that filled the room. Their eyes met. Neither of them spoke. Neither of them knew where to begin. It wasn't hatred keeping them silent. It wasn't anger either. It was something far more complicated. 7 months' worth of distance standing between them, like a wall neither had learned how to climb. Johnson felt the air shift when she looked at him. He saw recognition, surprise, a hint of relief she tried to hide, and something deeper, something that made his chest thicken. Johnson. She breathed, almost uncertain. He swallowed, stepping closer. I'm here. A soft, humorless laugh escaped her, sharp enough to reveal the pain beneath it. Didn't think you'd come. Her voice wasn't accusatory. It wasn't sarcastic. It was honest, painfully honest. Johnson moved closer to the side of her bed. You called me. Of course I came. She looked away, her eyes flicking toward the wall as she struggled through another wave of discomfort. Her breath shook. She held onto the rails tighter. He wanted to reach out. He wanted to help, but he didn't know if she would accept it. He didn't know if he deserved to. Do you need anything? He asked quietly. She shot him a tired glance. Yeah, for this baby to take it easy on me. Despite the tension, despite the whirlwind they were trapped in, he almost smiled. That was the Jan he remembered. Sharp, funny, full of life, even in moments like this. Another contraction hit her hard. She closed her eyes, head tilting forward. You okay? He asked. She nodded slowly, breathing through it. Still here, still fighting. There was weight in her words, weight he couldn't ignore. The awkwardness grew thicker between them, as the contraction faded. Johnson cleared his throat softly. January, I'm sorry for everything I didn't understand. She kept her eyes on him this time. Let's not jump into that right now, she whispered. There's a lot between us. Too much to unpack while I'm trying to not scream. He nodded. Right? Of course. But even with her saying that, even with all the tension pressing on them, something small but undeniable happened. The emotional distance between them shifted, just enough to remind them that underneath all the hurt, there was history. There was familiarity. There was something still alive. Johnson sat down in the chair beside her bed. She didn't ask him to. She didn't tell him to leave either. For now, that was enough. The room settled into a heavy quiet after the last contraction eased. Jan leaned back into the pillows, chest rising and falling as she regained her breath. Johnson sat beside her, unsure whether to speak or simply give her space. The silence wasn't hostile. It was the kind that forms when two people carry years of love, confusion, and unanswered questions between them. Jan loosened her grip on the rails, her fingers trembling slightly. She looked toward the window, avoiding his gaze, as if searching for the right place in her memories to start. Johnson, her voice was soft, almost hesitant. Since you're here, I think you should know why things fell apart the way they did. His posture straightened. He didn't interrupt. He had wanted this conversation for months. Jan exhaled slowly. We weren't speaking the same emotional language. Not ever. Not really. He lowered his eyes. I know. No, she corrected gently. You don't. She turned toward him then, eyes meeting his with a level of honesty she hadn't shown him in a long time. You grew up in a world where feelings had rules, where everything was neat, quiet, and scheduled, where people avoided saying how they really felt because it wasn't appropriate. He nodded slightly. That was the world he knew. Wealthy gatherings with polite conversation, where no one raised their voice and no one showed vulnerability. Everything was polished. Everything was controlled. But me? January continued. I grew up surrounded by noise. Good noise. My family didn't hide their emotions. If someone was upset, the whole house knew it. If someone needed help, you didn't ask whether it was convenient. You just stepped in. There were laughs so loud they shook the walls. Arguments that lasted 10 minutes and were forgotten after a shared meal. He could picture it easily. Her childhood home full of movement, conversation, music, life. That kind of world taught me to talk things out, she said, to confront problems as soon as they show up, to raise my voice if I had to. But your world told you to stay calm, to hold everything in, to keep the peace even when you felt like screaming. Johnson nodded again, slower this time, because it hurt to admit the truth. And when we tried to put those two worlds in one marriage, she said, we kept clashing, not because we didn't love each other, but because we didn't know how to meet in the middle. Johnson swallowed hard. I should have tried harder, I should have listened better. She didn't reject his apology. She didn't accept it either. She simply breathed through another uncomfortable twinge before responding. You tried in your own way, Jan said, but some things were too big for us to bridge. My family didn't understand your quietness. Your family didn't understand my loudness. I got tired of defending myself. You got tired of feeling like you were failing me. We both got tired of everything. He felt that sentence like a weight placed directly on his chest. She glanced at him again. Do you remember that night? I said I felt alone, even when you were sitting right next to me. He did. He remembered the sting of it. He remembered wanting to defend himself, but realizing she was right. I didn't know how to fix it, he admitted. I didn't know how to give you what you needed. You didn't know, because we came from different emotional worlds, she said simply, and neither of us understood how much baggage we were carrying until it was too late. Another contraction worked its way through her body. She winced, gripping the bed again, but she kept talking, her voice breaking slightly as she continued. I never stopped caring about you, Johnson, even when the marriage was falling apart. But love alone wasn't enough at that moment, not with everything else happening. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, voice low and sincere. I wish I'd understood sooner. I wish I had broken out of that cold environment instead of forcing myself into it. I wish I'd learned how to talk to you the way you needed. Jan blinked slowly, her expression softening just a little. We can't rewrite the past, she whispered, but we can be honest about what broke us. He met her gaze. Then say everything you need to say. I can take it. For the first time since he walked in, she offered a faint smile, tired but genuine. Don't worry, she muttered. I will. Despite their pain, despite their history, there was something in that moment, a small thread reconnecting, pulled tight by truth and transparency. And for the first time since their divorce, the emotional distance between them didn't feel impossible to cross. Jan rested back against the pillows, her breathing finally steadying after another contraction eased. The soft beeping of the monitor filled the room, creating a quiet rhythm under the tension between them. Johnson watched her closely, waiting, knowing there was more she needed to say, something heavier than the emotional distance they had already confronted. She didn't look at him at first. Her eyes drifted toward the blanket covering her legs, fingers fidgeting lightly as though gathering strength. Johnson, she began quietly, there's something else you need to know. He sat up straighter. I'm listening, she inhaled slowly, the breath shaky. I found out I was pregnant 3 weeks after the divorce. His heart paused in his chest. He didn't speak. He didn't even blink. He just waited for her to continue. I didn't tell you because everything hit me at once, she said, voice low, but steady. The week I found out was the same week I lost my job, the same week my apartment building caught fire, and the same week my aunt got sick. Johnson stiffened. Hearing the events in a single sentence made the weight of the past 7 months crash into him. You were dealing with all of that alone. His voice cracked slightly. Jan nodded. I didn't have the space to breathe, let alone call you. I was overwhelmed, scared, exhausted, and I didn't want to drag you into chaos when we couldn't even talk without arguing. He moved closer in the chair, elbows resting on his knees. You shouldn't have had to deal with that by yourself. She shook her head. It wasn't about pride. It wasn't about keeping the baby from you. I just didn't know how to handle everything happening at once. I barely had money after losing my job. I was moving from friend to friend while trying to take care of my aunt. I felt like I was holding the world together with my bare hands. Her voice broke slightly at the end, but she pushed through it. And on top of all that, I didn't know if you'd even want to hear from me. We weren't in a place where talking felt safe. Johnson let those words settle. He remembered the tension, the arguments, the disconnect. He remembered how cold their home had felt in the final months. He couldn't blame her for hesitating. Why didn't you at least tell me about the baby? He asked quietly, not accusing, just aching. John's eyes slowly met his. Because I wasn't sure you wanted one, she whispered. We fought about timing so many times. You kept saying you needed to fix your life before becoming a father. I didn't want you to feel trapped or forced. I didn't want our child to feel unwanted. He felt those words deeper than he expected. That's not what I meant, he said, voice thick. When I said I wasn't ready, I wasn't saying I didn't want one with you. I just didn't want to bring a child into a marriage full of tension. Her eyes softened, but it hurt her too, knowing how close they came to having everything before losing it. I know that now, she said, but back then, everything felt uncertain. I was scared. I didn't know how to tell you when my entire life was falling apart. She took another breath, deeper this time. And then I started showing. My aunt needed more help. Money got tighter. I was exhausted all the time. Every day I told myself I'd call you. But something else would collapse. And before I knew it, months passed. Johnson swallowed hard. He couldn't imagine the weight she carried, not just physically, but emotionally. You should have never had to suffer like that, he murmured. Jen looked at him with a mixture of sadness and quiet strength. I survived, and the baby did too. That's what mattered. Another contraction hit, not as strong, but enough to make her grip the blankets. Johnson leaned forward instinctively. You okay? She nodded, exhaling slowly. Yeah, just a small one. When the pain passed, she glanced at him again, this time with an expression neither of them had worn in months. Something gentler, something familiar. Talking to you right now, she whispered. It feels strangely normal. He allowed a small smile. Maybe because none of the noise is here, just us. A faint smile tugged at her lips. Maybe the distance between them, emotional and physical, felt different now. Not gone, but shifting, softening, rebuilding, not as lovers, not as enemies, but as two people finally telling the truth after too long. Jan rested her hand on her stomach, breathing slowly. "There's more you'll need to know," she added quietly. "But after she's born, whatever it is," he said, "I'll handle it." For the first time, she believed him. And for the first time, he wasn't running from the truth. Their connection, broken, bruised, but not destroyed, began stitching itself back together, one honest word at a time. The delivery room erupted into motion the moment Jan's next contraction hit. A nurse hurried past with a tray of equipment. A doctor checked the monitor with quick glances, and Jan gripped the sides of the bed like she was holding on through a storm. "Johnson," she snapped, breathing heavily. "Breathe with me." He straightened up immediately. "Yes, I'm trying." "Trying what?" She shot back. "You're breathing like someone who just swallowed hot soup." He attempted to inhale slowly, but it came out awkward and loud. A nearby nurse suppressed a laugh. "Sir," she said gently, "maybe let her lead." "I am letting her lead," he insisted, though his breathing pattern suggested the opposite. Jan glared at him. "Stop talking. You're messing up my rhythm." He nodded frantically. "Right. No talking. Silence. Total silence." 10 seconds passed. "Are we still breathing together?" he whispered. "Johnson!" Jan yelled. The nurse burst into quiet laughter behind her mask, turning away to hide it. Even the doctor cracked the smallest smile before returning to their instructions. "Okay, Jan, you're getting closer," the doctor said. "Take a deep breath. You've got this." She groaned low in her throat. "Easy for you to say. You're not the one doing all the work." Johnson lifted his hands defensively. "I can do work too. Tell me what to do." "You want to help?" She napped. "Stop breathing weird." He straightened instantly, trying to be useful even though he had no idea how. He reached out and held her hand gently at first, until she squeezed it so tightly he almost yelped. "Wow, okay, strong grip, very strong. Bones are optional anyway." She didn't even look at him. "Keep talking like that, and I'll squeeze harder." He pressed his lips together to keep from replying. But despite the chaos, the yelling, the breathing mishaps, the comedic tension, their movements slowly began aligning. He wiped her forehead when she asked. He steadied her shoulders. He whispered encouragement between contractions. And though they had fought countless times before, they moved in sync now, in a way they hadn't in years. Another contraction surged through her body, stronger than the last. Jan clenched her jaw and leaned forward with a power that made the entire room tense. "You're right there," the doctor said firmly. "One more push." Jan let out a sound that was equal parts frustration, pain, and strength, the kind only a woman in labor can produce. Johnson held her hand, this time bracing himself. "It's okay," he said softly. "I'm right here." Jan took one deep breath, gathered every ounce of strength she had left, and pushed. The room paused. Every voice quieted, every motion slowed, until a sound filled the air that cut straight into both of their hearts. A baby's cry. Soft, then stronger, then louder. Jan's eyes widened with disbelief. Johnson's breath hitched. The nurse smiled knowingly. "Congratulations," the doctor said warmly, lifting the newborn. "She's here." That single moment, that single cry, shifted everything. It was pure. It was real. It was the beginning of a new chapter neither of them expected. The room felt different the moment the newborn's cry softened into small, steady whimpers. The doctor gently placed the baby on Jan's chest, and everything around them, every noise, every frantic movement, seemed to fade into the background. Jan stared down at the tiny life resting against her, a look of awe settling over her face. Her exhaustion showed, but so did something else, something warm, fragile, and overwhelming. Johnson remained frozen in place, unable to take his eyes off the child. His hands hovered uncertainly in the air, as if he was afraid to disturb the moment. John glanced at him, her voice softer than it had been in months. "Do you want to hold her?" His breath caught. But Jan gave a small nod. "You're her father, Johnson." That sentence alone hit him harder than anything he'd felt all morning. The nurse stepped forward with a reassuring smile and gently lifted the baby from Jan's chest. "Here," she said, placing the child into Johnson's arms. "Support her head." Johnson held the baby the way someone holds a priceless treasure, with both hands steady but trembling slightly. The tiny weight in his arms felt unreal, as if he expected her to vanish if he blinked too long. Her eyes fluttered open for a moment. Johnson's heart nearly stopped. She's really here," he whispered. Jan watched him, her expression softening as she took in the sight of him. This man she once loved deeply, standing in the middle of the room holding their daughter like she was the most delicate thing he had ever touched. Johnson looked up, briefly, meeting Jan's gaze. His voice shook when he spoke. I don't know what I'm doing. I've never held a baby before." Jan smiled faintly. "You're doing just fine." He shifted his arm slightly, adjusting to her small weight, then looked back down at the baby's tiny fingers curled against his shirt. "She looks like you," Johnson murmured. Jan raised an eyebrow. "You sure?" "Positive," he replied. "She already has your attitude. I can feel it." Jan let out a tired laugh, short but real. It was the first genuine laugh she had shared with him since before the divorce. Johnson stepped closer to her bed, still holding the baby. "Jan, thank you for bringing her into the world, for keeping her safe, for everything. Jan looked down at her hands, suddenly emotional. I didn't do it alone. Yes, you did, he said softly. I wasn't there, but I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere. His voice didn't carry the desperation it once had. It carried certainty, something she hadn't heard from him in a long time. The baby made a soft sound, and Johnson instinctively rocked her gently, surprising even himself. The movement seemed natural, almost familiar, as though this moment had been waiting for him all along. Yen watched him, really watched him, and something inside her shifted. Not forgiveness, not love rekindling, but recognition. Recognition of the man she once believed he could be. Recognition of the gentleness she had hoped would surface. Recognition that the walls he once hid behind were finally gone. Johnson lowered his voice as he looked down at the child again. I didn't think I'd ever feel this. Feel what? Jan asked softly. This, he whispered, like everything makes sense. For the first time in a long time, a quiet settled between them, different from the awkward tension earlier. This quiet carried hope, possibility, a beginning disguised as a moment. Jan leaned her head back against the pillow, watching her daughter nestle deeper into Johnson's arms. Maybe this is our second chance to do something right, she murmured. He looked at her, eyes warmer now. Maybe it is. No promises, no declarations. Just a small bridge being rebuilt, one heartbeat at a time. The room had quieted after the rush of delivery, settling into the kind of calm that follows powerful moments. Johnson handed the baby back to Jan gently, making sure her head was supported before stepping back with a breath he didn't even realize he'd been holding. Jan stared down at their daughter, brushing a thumb along her tiny cheek. The tenderness in her expression contrasted sharply with the exhaustion written across her face. A nurse knocked lightly before entering with a clipboard. All right, she said in a cheerful tone. We just need to finalize a few details for the birth certificate and medical file. Jan shifted slightly, and Johnson pulled the chair closer so he could sit beside her. Mother's information is already filled out, the nurse said, flipping through the pages. Now we'll go over the father's section. She glanced between them. Is he signing today? Johnson nodded. Yes, I want to. The nurse smiled, but there was something in her expression, subtle, not judgmental, but curious, that didn't go unnoticed. Before we proceed, she continued, I'm required to ask if there are any special circumstances we should be aware of. Anything legal, medical, or safety-related that could affect the paperwork. Jan's shoulders tensed immediately. It wasn't drastic enough for someone unfamiliar to notice. But Johnson noticed. He leaned forward slightly. What kind of circumstances? Oh, the nurse said casually, just routine questions. For example, is there any reason the father shouldn't be listed? Any protective orders? Any ongoing investigations? Situations involving safety risks? Jan's jaw tightened. Johnson's eyes narrowed subtly, sensing the shift. The nurse, unaware of the tension she'd stirred, continued scanning the form. Also, if there were unusual events surrounding the pregnancy or living conditions, we're required to note them. Jan's hand froze where it rested on the baby's blanket. Johnson turned fully toward her now. He recognized that look. The look she made when she was bracing herself. "Jan," he said quietly, "is there something you didn't tell me?" The nurse stepped back politely. "I can give you a moment." She slipped out, closing the door behind her. Silence settled into the room, deep and charged. Jan kept her eyes on the blanket. Her breathing stayed slow, careful, as though she was choosing every inhale with precision. Johnson leaned closer, voice low but steady. "You need to tell me what's going on." Still, she didn't speak. "Jan," he pressed gently, "what are you hiding from me?" She closed her eyes for a moment, gathering courage, the weight of the truth pulling visibly at her shoulders. When she finally opened her eyes, they were filled with something raw. Not fear for herself, but fear for what the truth would do to them. "The fire?" she whispered. Johnson's heart dropped instantly. "What about it?" Jan's eyes lifted, meeting his with a seriousness that shook him. "Wasn't an accident." The words hit the room with the force of a sudden storm. Johnson leaned back slightly. Breath stalled in his throat. What do you mean it wasn't an accident?" She swallowed, fingers trembling lightly as they rested on the baby's blanket. "I didn't tell you before because everything was happening at once," she said softly. "But someone targeted my building. Someone wanted me out. Someone made sure I had nowhere safe to stay." His mind raced, trying to make sense of the implications. "January, who would do that?" he asked, voice strained. She looked down again, more vulnerable than he had ever seen her. "The same person who didn't want us together," she whispered. "The same person who thought I was a problem." Johnson felt a slow, cold realization settle over him. "This has to do with me, doesn't it?" Jan nodded, small but unmistakable. The air between them shifted. The truth was no longer something distant or theoretical. It here, sitting in the room, them staring at Johnson through Jan's trembling voice. "I think," she whispered, "someone from your world didn't want me in your life, and they went further than either of us imagined." And just like that, the path ahead changed. Not because of the baby, but because the danger that tore them apart was not gone. It was resurfacing. The room felt heavier after Jan's revelation. The quiet no longer felt peaceful. It felt loaded with unspoken danger. Johnson stood frozen beside her bed, trying to process what she had just admitted. The fire wasn't an accident. Someone had been looking for her. Someone had made sure she had nowhere safe to stay. Jan adjusted the baby's blanket carefully, avoiding his eyes at first. Her silence said everything. She didn't want to relive any of it, but she knew she couldn't hide it anymore. "Jan," Johnson said softly, "please tell me what happened." "All of it?" She exhaled slowly, gaze dropping to her hands. "I started noticing things before the fire. People asking about me. Someone calling my phone from blocked numbers. Someone waiting outside my building more than once." Johnson's stomach tightened. "Why didn't you tell me?" She met his eyes now, and pain flickered across her expression. "Because we weren't together anymore. Because you had your own life. Because I didn't think you'd believe me." "I would have believed you," he said immediately. Jan lifted an eyebrow, not in sarcasm, but in sad honesty. "Would you? Back then, you were barely talking to me. We could hardly get through a conversation without arguing." He opened his mouth, then closed it. She was right, and he hated that she was right. Jan continued, voice steady but low. "I thought it was just harassment at first, something random. But then the fire happened, and when I realized it wasn't an accident, everything clicked. Someone wanted me out of that building." Johnson ran a hand over his face, pacing once before returning to her side. "Jan, oh my God, you were pregnant, and you were dealing with that alone." Her eyes softened, but only for a moment. "I didn't have a choice." Johnson clenched his jaw. He felt guilt crushing him, heavy, sharp, undeniable. He wasn't just absent. He had been unaware of the danger surrounding her. "I should have protected you," he whispered. Jan shook her head. "Oh, you didn't know, Johnson?" "I should have known," he said, voice tightening. "I should have been there. I should have checked on you. I should have never walked away from you the way I did." His guilt spilled out, raw and unfiltered. Jan watched him quietly, torn between the pain of the past and the complicated relief of finally telling the truth. "You're here now," she said softly. "That's what matters today." But even she couldn't ignore the weight of her next words. "Someone was looking for me," she repeated, lower this time. "Someone who knew exactly where I lived." She hesitated. "And someone who made sure I wouldn't feel safe again." Johnson inhaled sharply, his entire body tensing. This wasn't just misfortune. This wasn't coincidence. This was a threat, and he felt responsible. Even if she didn't blame him, he blamed himself. Jan rested a protective hand over their daughter, a small gesture that ignited something fierce in Johnson. Whoever had targeted her, whoever had caused the fire, whoever had made her hide during her pregnancy, they weren't going to get near her again. Not while he was here. A new resolve settled into his voice as he stepped closer to her bed. Jan, whoever did this will not touch you or our daughter ever again. I promise you. She looked at him, really looked, and for the first time since the divorce, she saw something she thought she had lost forever. A man who wasn't afraid to stand up for her. A man who wasn't running from responsibility. A man who finally understood what she had been trying to say all along. Their daughter let out a small sound, almost as if sensing the shift. Jan's eyes softened, but the fear underneath her calm expression remained, because the truth hadn't finished unfolding. The silence between them deepened after Jan's last revelation, heavy enough to press against the walls of the hospital room. Johnson remained standing, hands clenched at his sides, trying and failing to piece everything together. Someone targeted her. Someone made her fear for her life. Someone made sure she had nowhere stable to stay while carrying his child. But the question that haunted him now lingered in the air between them, unspoken but undeniable. Jan shifted uncomfortably on the bed, eyes drifting from the baby to Johnson. Her hesitation grew thick, and he recognized that look immediately. She was bracing herself to say something he wouldn't want to hear. "Jan," he said quietly, "tell me the rest." She looked down again, her fingers tracing the edge of their daughter's blanket. "The person who came after me wasn't from my neighborhood. They weren't someone I'd ever met before." Johnson's breath caught slightly. "Then who were they?" She looked up at him slowly. "Someone who knew." His entire body went still. She continued, voice steady but weighted. "Someone from your world, your circles, your environment, the life you grew up in." Johnson stared at her, stunned, struggling to find the right words. "Jan, that can't be right." "No one I know would ever." She cut him off gently. "Think about it, Johnson. I didn't have enemies. I didn't have conflicts with anyone. I wasn't involved in anything dangerous. The only thing that changed before the fire was us." The truth stung because it made sense in a way he wished it didn't. She swallowed hard. "That night before the fire, my neighbor told me someone came by asking questions. Not casual questions, personal ones. They described my appearance. They asked what times I usually came home. They even asked which unit I lived in." Johnson's face slowly drained of color. "Did they give a name?" he asked. Jan shook her head. "No name, just a description. Well-dressed, confident. Looked like they belonged in a boardroom, not in my building." That's what she said. The description alone pushed 1,000 possibilities through Johnson's mind. Business associates, old money families, powerful acquaintances he never truly trusted. People who believed they had the right to involve themselves in his personal life. Jan continued, "I didn't want to believe it had anything to do with you. I kept telling myself it was random. But then, after the fire, someone called me." Johnson's breath caught. "Called you?" "Yes." Her voice trembled. And whoever it was, they told me to stay away. He took a step closer, anger simmering beneath his calm expression. Stay away from who? Jan's eyes locked onto his. You. The words hit him like a physical blow. He felt something inside him break open. Guilt, rage, confusion blending into something far more dangerous. That's why you left so quickly. That's why you never called back? He asked, voice strained. Jan nodded slowly. Every time I wanted to reach out, I remembered that voice. I remembered losing my home. I remembered my aunt depending on me. And I realized someone didn't want us together. Someone with enough confidence to walk into my building like they owned it. Johnson sat down, his mind racing. Suddenly their past arguments about culture, communication, lifestyle differences took on a new dimension. It wasn't just us fighting, Jan said quietly. Someone pushed us apart. Someone made sure the cracks grew wider. Johnson's jaw tightened. Someone thought they had the right to interfere in our lives. Jan nodded once. Someone from your world. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped tightly. I should have protected you from them. I should have known something was wrong. Jan placed a gentle hand over her daughter, her expression soft but layered with pain. You couldn't have known. I didn't even understand until it was too late. Johnson shook his head, voice low with determination. No, I should have noticed the signs. I should have questioned everything when the divorce felt wrong, forced, too sudden. He looked up, eyes hardening with resolve Jan hadn't seen in him before. Whoever did this, he said quietly, made a mistake coming after you. Jan studied him closely. The shift in his demeanor, the protective fire that had ignited in him. We don't even know who it is yet, she whispered. We will, Johnson replied. And when we do, they'll regret ever touching your life. For a moment, Jan didn't speak. She simply watched him, this man she once married, once loved, once feared losing forever, as he stepped into a version of himself she had never fully seen. Confident, protective, dangerously calm. The baby stirred softly between them, bringing a fragile warmth into the tense space. Jan brushed a hand across her daughter's forehead and looked back at Johnson. There's something else, she said quietly. Something you need to know before we go any further. He leaned in slightly, bracing himself. And just like that, the path of truth drew them both toward the next revelation. The room seemed to shrink around them as Jan's last words hung in the air. Johnson leaned closer, tension tightening across his shoulders. He could tell she was holding something back, something heavier than anything she'd shared so far. Jan, he said quietly, whatever it is, just tell me. She hesitated, eyes drifting toward their daughter, who had begun to settle into a soft, rhythmic breathing. Jan brushed the back of her finger against the baby's cheek, grounding herself before looking back at him. There's a reason I called you today, she whispered. Johnson frowned, softly. Because you were in labor. That's only part of it, she replied. I wasn't just afraid to go through this alone. I was afraid of what might happen if I didn't reach out. Her voice softened even further. Careful, cautious. He's back. Johnson didn't understand at first. Who? Yan's eyes held a fear she had been trying to hide since the moment he walked in. The same person who came after me before. The same person who caused the fire. The same person who made me feel unsafe every time I stepped outside. Johnson's heartbeat accelerated. January, when did you find out? 2 days ago, she said. I saw him. Or at least, I saw someone watching me. Someone who matched the description my neighbor gave me back then. Same posture. Same way of standing, like he owned the space around him. A chill rolled through Johnson's chest. And you're sure it was him? Jan nodded. Absolutely. Johnson straightened, his body transitioning into a stillness that wasn't fear. It was determination. Sharp, focused determination. You should have told me immediately, he said. I didn't want to panic you, she replied. I wasn't sure if you'd believe me, but when the contractions started, and I thought about bringing this baby into the world, I couldn't stay quiet anymore. He moved even closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear him. You did the right thing, calling me. Jan let out a shaky breath, something between relief and guilt. I was scared he'd try something again. And I didn't want to be alone when that happened. Johnson's jaw tightened, eyes burning with a protective fire she had never seen in him before. You're not alone, he said firmly. Not now. Not ever again. She searched his face, trying to understand whether the sudden strength in his voice came from fear, anger, or something deeper. Johnson, she whispered. He interrupted gently but firmly. I'm not letting anyone hurt you or our daughter. Whoever this man is, whoever he thinks he is, he has no idea what he stepped into now. For a moment, Jan didn't speak. The vulnerability in her eyes contrasted with the quiet strength in her posture, as if she'd finally allowed someone to share the weight she'd been carrying. The air thickened with tension, emotional, protective, dangerous in its intensity. Their daughter stirred again, and Johnson looked down at her with a kind of fierce softness that surprised even himself. I will protect both of you, he said. Jan's breath trembled, her shoulders loosening just enough to reveal how deeply she needed to hear that. Before the tension carried them any further, Johnson inhaled slowly and looked up again, remembering something important, not for himself, but for the viewers who were following this emotional storm. Before we continue, make sure you subscribe if you want more deep, emotional, and powerful stories like this. Your support helps us bring more unforgettable narratives straight to you. The room fell quiet again after Johnson's words, but it was a different kind of quiet now. A quiet filled with resolve. A quiet filled with unspoken understanding. A quiet that marked the beginning of something neither of them saw coming. Jan finally spoke again, voice steady but low. I didn't call you just because he returned, she said. I called because I don't know what he wants this time. Johnson leaned forward, eyes locked onto hers. I don't care what he wants, he replied. He won't get near you. Not as long as I'm breathing. The shift in Johnson was undeniable. No hesitation, no confusion, no distance. Jan's eyes softened. I'm trusting you with this. You can, he said. You always could. The tension between them deepened, not cold, not nostalgic, but something powerful and protective that neither of them fully understood yet. Because now, the danger wasn't just part of the past. It was creeping back into their lives. And Johnson was done standing on the sidelines. The moment Jan whispered, I don't know what he wants this time, something switched inside Johnson. The protective instinct that had been rising inside him finally solidified into action. He stood from the chair slowly, his jaw tightening with a resolve Jan had never seen in him before. Not the controlled calm of a businessman, not the distant quiet of the man she divorced. This different. This was a man ready to confront whoever had torn their lives apart. I won't let him get anywhere near you again, Johnson said, voice low but steady. Jan watched him, her eyes filled with fatigue, fear, and a fragile trust she hadn't felt in months. She didn't stop him. She simply nodded. Be careful, she whispered. He didn't answer. He only leaned down, pressed a brief hand on the blanket covering their daughter, then walked out of the room with a purpose that made nurses instinctively step out of his way. By the time he reached the parking garage, his breath had evened out, but his rage had not. Washington looked different now. Every corner felt suspicious, every passerby a potential threat. Whoever had targeted Jan didn't just cross a line. They set the entire boundary on fire. He climbed into his car and started the engine, hands gripping the wheel. There was only one place to go, one circle of people who had access to him, knew his relationships, and had enough arrogance to think they could interfere in his life. His family's financial consultant, an older man who had managed their wealth for decades and believed himself more gatekeeper than employee. The same man who always spoke down to January. The same man who believed Johnson's marriage had been a mistake. And the same man whose subtle comments had once planted doubt into Johnson's mind. Johnson headed straight to the firm's private building, a sleek piece of glass towering over the city. He marched through the lobby without waiting for permission, ignoring the startled receptionist calling after him. He pushed into a conference room where the consultant sat reviewing documents. The man looked up with irritation. Johnson, you can't just walk. Did you send someone after January? Johnson asked, his voice sharp enough to slice through the silence. The consultant blinked, thrown off. Excuse me? You heard me, Johnson said, stepping forward. Did you send someone to threaten her? To scare her? Did you have anything to do with the fire? The consultant's expression stiffened, not shocked, but uncomfortable. Johnson, he said slowly, Sometimes you must accept guidance. That relationship was never suitable for... Johnson slammed his hands on the table. The consultant flinched, but tried to recover his composure. I merely took steps to secure your reputation. People talk. Investors judge. Your marriage complicated things, so you sabotaged her. Johnson's voice dropped dangerously low. I protected you, the man insisted. She was not appropriate for your image. And when she refused to leave quietly, Johnson's fists clenched, his heartbeat pounding through his ears. You sent someone to intimidate her, he said, to scare her out of my life. The consultant didn't deny it. Fine, the man said, adjusting his tie, if that's how you want to phrase it. But it worked, didn't it? You divorced her. You're back on track. Investors are pleased. The board respects. Johnson didn't let him finish. He grabbed the man by the collar and shoved him against the wall so hard the framed certificates rattled. The consultant gasped, stunned by a version of Johnson he had never encountered. You endangered the mother of my child, Johnson growled. You made her run. You made her fear for her life. And you put my daughter in danger before she was even born. The consultant's eyes widened as the truth struck him. Daughter? You had a child with her? Johnson pressed him harder. That's none of your business. What is your business is what you did to her. I didn't mean for... Johnson cut him off again. You don't get to... The room pulsed with tension. The consultant shrank beneath Johnson's grip, realizing too late that he had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. If you ever go near her again, Johnson said, voice shaking with controlled fury, or if anyone connected to you so much as thinks about contacting her, I will end your career, your connections, your influence, everything. He released him abruptly. The consultant stumbled, gasping for air. Stay away from Jan. Stay away from my daughter. And stay away from me. Johnson left the room without looking back, leaving the man trembling and pale against the wall. As he walked out of the building, a strange mixture of adrenaline and clarity surged through him. For the first time, he realized how much damage other people had inflicted on his marriage, damage he didn't recognize until now. But now he was done letting anyone else control his world. He got back in his car, breathing deeply as he pulled onto the road, heading straight back to the hospital. Not as a billionaire, not an ex-husband, but as a man who finally understood exactly what and who he needed to protect. His family. Johnson's footsteps echoed through the hospital corridor as he returned. The confrontation still pulsed through him. Anger, relief, and a strange sense of awakening. But as soon as he reached Jan's room, everything inside him softened. He paused at the doorway. Jan sat propped against the pillows, holding their daughter close, whispering something quiet and comforting as the baby shifted sleepily against her chest. A thin band of afternoon light from the window fell across them, highlighting the calm that settled after the storm of labor. Johnson exhaled slowly. This was the moment he had almost lost, without even knowing. He stepped inside. Jan looked up immediately. Her eyes held a mixture of exhaustion and curiosity, but underneath both was something deeper, a question she hadn't asked yet. "You're back," she said quietly. "Of course," he replied, closing the door gently behind him. "I told you. I'm not going anywhere." He approached the bed, noticing how small the baby looked in Jan's arms. How peaceful. How whole. Jan studied his face, searching for clues. "Something happened while you were gone." He sat beside her, slowly. "I took care of it." Her eyebrows lifted slightly. "What does that mean?" Johnson didn't give details yet, not because he wanted to hide anything, but because the intensity of the confrontation still felt too sharp to bring into this soft space. "It means the person who caused all of this won't be a problem anymore," he said. "I made that very clear." Jan looked at him for a long moment, absorbing not just the words, but the tone, the certainty, the strength, the quiet fury beneath it. "Thank you," she whispered. "I didn't want to keep living in fear." "You won't," he said, leaning forward slightly. "Not with me here." Their daughter let out a small, squeaky sound, drawing both their eyes downward. Jan adjusted her gently, smiling despite her exhaustion. "She keeps making that little noise," Jan murmured. "It's like she's trying to talk already." Johnson chuckled softly. "Knowing us, she probably has something important to say." "For real," Jan said with a tired laugh. A soft warmth settled over them. Their first shared moment that didn't include fear, tension, or pain. Just the three of them. Quiet, connected. Jan stroked the baby's cheek slowly. "She looks so much like you." Johnson blinked in surprise. "Really? I thought she looked like you." "Oh, don't flatter me," Jan teased gently. "Look at her eyebrows. That's all you." He laughed again, shaking his head. Jan relaxed further into the pillows. "You want to hold her again?" He nodded instantly. Jan adjusted their daughter and lifted her just enough for Johnson to slide his hands underneath. He took the baby with more confidence this time, pulling her close to his chest. The tiny warmth settled against him, quiet and trusting. His entire expression changed, softer, deeper, more aware of what he was holding. Jan watched him, her eyes full of something she thought she had let go months ago. "Johnson," she said quietly. He looked up. "Thank you for coming today," she said. "I know everything was unexpected. I know I kept too much from you, but seeing you here, holding her, caring like this, I don't regret calling." He swallowed, feeling emotion rise in a way he wasn't used to. "I should have been here sooner, January. I should have been in your life this whole time. You deserved support. You deserved honesty. You deserved more than what you got from me. Back then." She nodded slowly. "We were both hurting. Life hit us from different sides. And we weren't ready, but we can be ready now, he said gently. Not to rush anything, not to pretend the past never happened, but to take care of our daughter. Together, Jan looked down at her hands, then back at him. I want that, she whispered. I want her to feel safe, loved, and I want her to know both parents tried. Tried, he repeated softly. Kept trying. The baby stirred slightly, pressing her tiny hand against Johnson's shirt. He smiled, and for first time, it wasn't bittersweet. It was hopeful. Jan watched him, noticing the shift. The man he had become in the span of one impossible day. Whatever happens between us, she said softly, I don't want us to go back to being strangers. Johnson nodded. We won't. Not anymore. There was no forced romance, no unrealistic promises. Just a quiet understanding between two people who had survived chaos, heartbreak, and danger, only to find themselves sharing the most important moment of their lives, the beginning of something new. Not a rekindled love, not a forced reunion, but a family learning how to exist again together. The evening light softened the hospital room, casting a quiet glow across the space as the day drew to a close. The chaos, fear, and emotional storm that had consumed their morning had settled into something gentler, something steady. Jan rested against her pillows, eyes half closed but peaceful, while Johnson sat by her side, holding their daughter with a confidence that surprised even him. The newborn slept against his chest, her breathing soft and calm, her tiny hand curled loosely against his shirt. Johnson looked down at her with awe, the kind that runs deeper than excitement, an awe wrapped in purpose, responsibility, and an emotion he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. Jan opened her eyes slowly. You okay over there? He nodded. Better than okay. She smiled faintly, shifting slightly to get comfortable. I've never seen you this. Settled. He looked at her then. Really looked. I've never had a reason to be. Their eyes held for a moment, not with the heat of old love or the tension of unresolved anger, but with a calm acknowledgment of everything they had survived. Jan cleared her throat softly. We should talk about what happens next. Absolutely, he replied. Whatever you're thinking, I want to hear it. She hesitated for a moment before speaking. I don't want us to rush anything. We've been through too much today, and honestly, we were already struggling before everything else happened. He nodded in agreement. You're right, but she continued. I want to heal. I want us to figure out how to be a family for her, without forcing something we're not ready for. Johnson absorbed that slowly, then smiled, not in sadness, but in genuine understanding. That's exactly what I want, he said. No pressure, no expectations, just honesty, just us trying and doing right by her. Jan let out a breath. She didn't realize she'd been holding. Good, because I don't want her growing up in confusion or conflict. I want her to have stability, and I want us to give her that together. We will, he said firmly. I'm here. I'm staying. Not because of obligation, but because I want to be present for both of you. She nodded, her eyes softening. That means more than you know. They fell quiet again, but this silence felt warm, earned, like a chapter ending without closing the book. Johnson shifted slightly, looking down at his daughter again. You know, I was always scared of being a father. I thought I wasn't ready. I thought I'd disappoint you. Or myself. Jan tilted her head. And now? Now? He smiled gently. I just want to be better tomorrow than I was yesterday. She smiled too. Slow, honest. That's all anyone can ask for. The moment stretched, and something unspoken settled between them. A quiet understanding that their story wasn't ending. It was shifting, evolving, becoming something new. Not a romantic reunion, not a dramatic kiss, but a beginning built on truth, accountability, and a shared goal. Their daughter stirred, letting out a tiny sigh as if reminding them she was the heart of this new world they were building. Jan brushed her fingers across the baby's small hand. She's our fresh start. Johnson nodded. And our reminder. What? Jan asked. That timing matters, he said. Love isn't always enough if the timing is wrong. But that doesn't mean love disappears. It just waits for people to grow into the version of themselves they were supposed to be. Jan let that sink in, deeply, thoughtfully. And protection matters, she added softly. Not just physical protection, emotional protection. Protecting each other from pride, silence, and outside voices. Johnson nodded. And family doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to choose each other every day. They sat together in that truth, letting it settle like the final piece of a puzzle they didn't know they'd been building. Jan shifted again, voice lower now. I'm willing to see where this new chapter takes us. Slowly, honestly. Johnson smiled, his voice almost a whisper. Me too. Their daughter slept peacefully between them. A quiet promise, a new beginning, a bridge between two hearts learning how to rebuild without rushing the process. Johnson adjusted his hold on her one last time. No matter what, I'm here. I'll always be here. Jan nodded, a tear slipping quietly down her cheek. Not from sadness, but from relief. For the first time in months, she felt safe. For the first time in months, he felt present. And for the first time in months, the future didn't feel like an enemy. Felt possible. Before you go, make sure you like this video. Share it with someone who needs a powerful story today. And subscribe for more emotional, inspiring, and unforgettable stories from Mr. Michael Stories Hub. Your support helps us continue creating meaningful content for you.